Shut up, compressor.
Yeah, low shape proposed.
Repeat that low approach.
Low shape proposed. Category interference.
Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to episode 2 of the Zoukei-Mura F-4G Wild Weasel build. Now in episode 1 it was all about getting the harms situated. Now we're going to move on to the cockpit and start getting that up and running. And I've done a little bit of advanced work, and I must say these MCC ejection seats are amazing. They are super detailed, 3D printed, just absolutely gorgeous. But I'm not entirely 100% sure that I'm going to use them on this or on another F4G. We'll see. But for now, they're just kind of it's fun to have them just kind of sitting there doing their thing, right? So, preview of what may be to come. But this is basically the shell of the cockpit. So there are a couple parts in here already, rudder pedals, bulkheads, the rails for the ejection seats, more rudder pedals and things like that. And on the underside, we have the nose gear bay, which has been painted white. Exciting. Now, one thing I really like about the Zoukei-Mura kit, there are some things I don't like. I don't like the way that the cockpit sill sits on top of this and is like its own separate thing from the fuselage halves. But something I really like is the way that all the instrument panels are separate parts that get installed. And so that means that it is possible for Zoukei-Mura to have the same basic shell for all of their F4 cockpits, and then just give you a separate sprue that has the individual parts, and they're quite detailed. Very nice for a 1/48 scale jet. I mean, that's definitely workable, right? Look at like the main instrument panels here. I mean, all quite well done. But I've got a little something cool for this build that I'm going to see how it goes. So I'm a big believer in the fact that cockpits basically deserve as much work as they can be seen. Something like a F4F Wildcat doesn't really need all that much work because it's tough to see in those cockpits. The aperture is very small. Whereas something like an A6 Intruder, where all you see is the cockpit, go to town. F4 Phantoms are kind of in between. They've got a lot of detail in here. They've got 2 seats, etc. But they've also got very high fuselage walls. They've got relatively narrow aperture. And so a lot of this stuff just kind of gets buried. Really gets buried if you have a crew in it. But even without the crew, the focus is going to be on the ejection seats and the instrument panels. And that's about it. And in those cases, I'm all about taking the quickest path possible to completion. And if something looks amazing and looks as good as I could do with a lot of effort, why not use it and save those fucks for somewhere else? And so to that end, Attila at Red Fox Studios sent me their collaboration with Zoukei-Mura to create these really gorgeous cockpit instrument panel acrylic things. They're basically like, what you've come to expect from these sort of 3D decal things that go in cockpits. But as I noted when I looked at the ones for the Mang EA-18 Growler, the cool thing about Red Fox compared to some of the other ones is they are the first ones I've seen to actually get anywhere close to what dark gold gray looks like. And these are pretty much the same story. Like, they get very, very much in the ballpark. Something else about these that I really like. A lot of times these, or even the decals that come with these kits, the multifunction displays will always have some sort of stupid little graphic on them. These are just solid. And I dig that quite a bit. And I also really like how, if you look at it, not only is it solid or not just like some stupid ass graphic, right? It's also got a very slight gradient in it, which works wonderfully when it is looked at from the angle that we looked at, because it's coming down brighter on top, darker on bottom. Just helps convey that sense of depth really well. So, what does it take to install these? How do we get from this to where they're installed here? Well, that's where there's always this little bit of sacrifice required. We've got these things. These are all the different cockpit panels, kind of scattered around. Basically, we need to remove the detail from them so that they are able to be replaced by this stuff. And that's never, it always feels a bit dirty doing that. But, yeah, let's get to it. Something I've thought about doing in sort of like an idle basis for years is basically taking one of these things and just mapping it out in Fusion 360 so that I could essentially print a flat version without having to go through all the destruction that this entails. But, what am I, the more I think about, like, what am I going to do with a leftover piece? Like, am I just going to have it? Like, it seems kind of dumb. So, as tempting as that idea sounded, it's never really made a lot of sense. Now, what would make a lot of sense would be to scan this, to at least kind of like get the placement and size of fucking hell. To at least get the size and placement of everything, and then make my own hot shit 3D printed thing, with holes for 3D switches and knobs and all that, so that you could go to town with details and stencils and come in and add the really cool detail after all the stencils are in place, and you just have, a really great looking cockpit. I don't think it's required for a 1/48 scale F4. If we were talking an F-16, those have quite wide open cockpits. Maybe a different story. But again, the relatively narrow, high-walled fuselage shit that Phantoms have going on, probably overkill. Anyway, we just come in here and I'm using an Infiniglass file to knock the detail down. But you can use a file, you can use sanding blocks. Basically, you just want it to be flat. And I'm going to try to get a little bit deeper than I normally get, because something I've noticed on these is these panels can be a little bit taller than you're maybe thinking, and then they interfere with the fit of other things. And so if we remove a little bit of extra detail, ceramic blades are great for detail removal too. Just another one of those. So anyway, getting down and down and down, just removing layers. One thing I'm noticing on this Zoukei-Mura kit is shit definitely seems a little bit rockier than it was on the F4D. I mean, not terribly so, but just a little bit. Okay, so now that I've got a bunch of scraped away parts, these are the main cockpit parts, but we've also got, additional things. We've got instrument panels. We've got all the circuit breaker stuff in the rear compartment. It's time to go ahead and paint it dark gold gray. Okay, so now that I've painted the cockpit dark gold gray, it's time to go ahead and get the various panels in place. Now, one thing about these Red Fox sets, they say dip them in water, like decals, which is why everybody calls them decals. They're really not decals. And I have found, at least with sets I've used, half the time you don't even have to dip them in water. They can kind of like just break away from the carrier film or the carrier sheet anyway. But just for shits and giggles, let's see how it does. See, you just kind of pull that back, and boom, you have this thing loose. And it's not going to sit in place with whatever adhesives on the back of it. Anyway, it needs glue. So, if you just want to peel these off, it keeps them from warping and bunching up, and they kind of stay in this round shape there. But this is one for one of the many, many circuit breaker panels on the back seat side console. So let's see which one it is. All right, so basically now just grab a little bit of, for adhesive, I'm using Ammo Ultra Glue for these big easies. You know, it may make sense to switch up for some others, but for these ones where we don't have to worry about, fitting over any weird curves or anything like that, Ultra Glue works quite well. Let's get that in place. I'm actually going to switch this around so I'm dropping in from the top because the bottom has a weird ass angle on it. All right, and then just yeet that fucker into place. And from there, we basically just leave this to sit and dry. And I know it's hard to see the exact nature of how good the detail on these things are, but each one of these little switches has height. It has a z-axis. So that in and of itself brings it way, way, way above pretty much anything else out there. Unless you want to go in and literally drop a bunch of these little fuckers yourself, which, more power to you. I don't think it's worth it on a 148 Phantom. Alright, now one of the big bastards of the thing. You know. Okay, next up I need to do some cockpit sill work and make a few other things, sort of a darkish gray slash black color. So basically this little bit right in here, this fucking thing, etc. Also going to go ahead and get the instrument panel combing while we're in here. So yeah, all this paint out here doesn't really matter at this point. It needs to be sanded over anyway, but basically just to get things moving, I'm using some MRP tire rubber. It's a dark gray black type color. This will be painted over, but I just want to get some shit established. It's one design element I just frustrates me about this Zoukei-Mura kit. Basically, the cockpit is going to fit in here, and the sill plate kind of sit right there, right? And then from there, it needs to be glued, and then it needs to be, squeezed all nice and tight, and then it needs to be painted. Last time I painted it all, etc., and then went to glue it in, and it was kind of like, well, shit, now I'm stuck because I don't want to use cement right there, so it was just a bit of a mess. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to paint most of it, and I'm going to leave it so I can sacrifice it. But I just really won't have to worry about, like, if I want to run masking tape along the interior portion or something like that, like I can do that with confidence and just not have to worry that much about the rest of it. So, yay. But first, we also have this shit back here, the back side of the rear seat panel, and I want to paint that too. And while it's just sitting here like this, that is the perfect way to mask it. So yeah, now look at that. Sweet. Okay, and then now that we've got that all settled, pull that out of its perch, sit it over there, and pick right back up. Okay. I think that's looking pretty solid. Let's do the combing real fast. And I think what I'm going to do with the combing is I'm going to paint the overall thing, again, this sort of dark gray color, and come back in and pick out some of these individual boxes and shit in black. Get some more contrast. Make stuff look cooler. Okay, now we're picking out some details with just a bit of Vallejo black. I've been using a kind of ratty brush just for like the control stick grips and things like that. I don't know if it's going to really work for what I want to do on the instrument panel combing. But you know what, if we fuck up, we can always switch brushes out. This one's just a little bit unkempt. But I think we might be able to get what we want out of it. Okay. So let's that shit dry, and I'm going to go ahead and grab like the throttle and things like that and get them painted as well. So we're starting to get some pieces together. And pretty soon it's going to be time to get all this assembled. But right now, here's what we're looking at. Come in and drop the sill piece on top. And man, look at that back seat. That is awesome. And then place the pilot's instrument panel up here. Yeah, this is definitely looking nice and busy. And once we get seats in there, right now it looks very empty because the seats aren't in there, but just to give you a sense with these resin MCC seats, that fucking instrument panel is driving me crazy. I mean, once the seats go in, like, look how much space disappears, right? And you have a lot of busyness going on. You can see how far the sill plates are going to come in, how much room is going to be taken up by the fuselage sidewalls. So, sweet. Okay, so the Red Fox SWS 3D decal things have had about 2 days to kind of set up. So it's time to go in here and start with some weathering. And, you know, an F-4G kept in pretty decent condition. We're not talking like a, you know, P-47 taking off of a primitive airstrip in Italy or something like that. These things were based at, you know, pretty substantial air bases. Kept in pretty good condition. A bit older because, you know, they were generally converted machines and things like that. But nothing super heavy in here. So I'm going to go with some Mr. Weathering Color Multi-Gray. And basically just kind of getting this onto some of these details on the firewalls. Now, if these were going to just remain exposed, this might be where I would keep it, but anybody who's been following my videos long enough knows that F4 cockpits get buried in the fuselage and you lose a lot of visibility, so contrast is your friend. And we're going to keep that in mind. I don't know, I've got a real sense of it's pointless when it comes to weathering up 148 cockpits. Again, for things like a Phantom that have generally a lot of bulk in the way of the sides and whatnot, kind of overhanging the sides. F-14s are a little better. F-16s gloriously open, but these guys, no way. They are buried. So now we've got some ground brown. How about that? Just want a little bit of this stuff. Nothing too heavy. Basically, just to kind of dirty up the footwell area. This will not stay that stark. I will not let it. A little bit thinner. Break that up. Yeah, how about that? That looks pretty decent, right? Got a little bit of that. And just for shits and giggles, let's see what this looks like once we put a seat in, right? And these are the MCC 3D printed seats that I am strongly considering using. They are gorgeous. I just don't know if they're going to go in this one or the Mang. We'll see. But they cover everything. It's almost pointless to go in there and add more. I may add more just for the shadow detail, but that's really it. On the floorboards, the other option, I stole these out of Eagly because Eagly is not getting done. These are some quick boost seats. They have the benefit of already being painted. But, I mean, you can see same difference, right? Like maybe a little bit narrower, a little bit more view on the sides, but not much. But I think that's a good indication. I need to at least cover the sides and sort of the back corners because, you know, that's where you drop the Tic Tacs and shit. Yeah, that'll do. Now we need a little bit of black. Yeah. Okay, next up, it is time to go ahead and seal this stuff with some MRP matte clear. Kind of calm down some of that reflective glare stuff we got going on with the side panels. Ta-da! Alright, and to make sure that I'm restoring sheen to the forward instrument panel, I'm going to be using some thin UV curing glue and a toothpick. So basically we're just going to go in like that. Okay. So that's pretty good. Move that somewhere else. And then we take the UV light and we just hit it. And from that we can do the fun, get this damn thing installed type of deal, right? Alright, so I'm going to use extra thin. I'm going to be surgical, go in the back way. And look at that. That's a pretty damn fine looking instrument panel and cockpit, if I don't say so myself. Especially once it gets installed, that's going to be some hot shit. Alright, and to close the loop on this, with this thing, it's a matter of... There are some needles that need to be threaded with this. It's kind of annoying. Okay, so let's do some quick setting. So we want to put one little dollop right back here. Make sure this thing's holding. And then I want to go ahead and make sure that I'm getting some glue onto this thing to actually hold it in place. Okay, so that's looking pretty badass, and I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up for essentially the main effort of the cockpit. I think I'm going to do two more quick things before we wrap up this video. First of those is going to be, the gear bay. Need to do something about that. Not too much. It's a gear bay, but it needs a little bit of love. And then I think I'm going to try to get the fuselage halves joined up. Maybe. But first we need to, do a little bit of work in here. I need to look at my master set that has the pitot tube, and I think it also has a replacement for this thing, which would be nice, because this thing is one of those rare things on these kits that kind of looks like ass. So, be nice to figure that out. And, yeah, but first, I'm going to kind of bask in the cockpit being in a really good place. And then, these aren't the seats I'll be using, these are going to be used in the Ming, but if you want to get a sense of sort of how the whole thing is going to look, certainly do worse than quick boost seats. So there's our cockpit. Yay. Okay, now that this is all ready to go, let's move on and get some wash down on the gear bay. So for this I'm using my good old Aqua Gloss Tamiya Rubber Black and water mix. Basically it's 50-50 water and Aqua Gloss. A couple drops of Matisse Surface Tension Breaker, and about 4 drops of Tamiya XF 85 Rubber Black. This is a good ratio to get, a nice kind of not clean gear bay. We don't want it to be filthy, but it'll provide a bit of definition to all of the little details that Zoukei-Mura shoved down in here for us to play with. And if we want to really come in here and super detail this later, which I don't because it's a gear bay on the bottom of a Phantom, which has a low wing and a low fuselage, and this is just not going to be seen. But if it were, this kind of thing is great because you can get in here, get a lot of detail going. And then come back and go crazy with the super detailing stuff once you've got this definition in place. Or you can super detail it first, then do that. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. I'm just blabbering at this point. And we'll call it a day from there. Oh, and before I forget about it, I want to go ahead and prepare the fuselage to get the spine installed and get everything fitting nicely. And so for that, I'm going to prepare a bit of a welcome party. Once you glue the fuselage halves together, you're kind of stuck, right? This shelf is nice, but what if you need to get in here and the spine insert that sits in here, say you glue it in and it sits a little bit under, the line it wants to, or it sits a bit off. By drilling holes here, so by drilling a hole right there, for example, say shit doesn't fit quite right, well, we've got toothpicks exist, and we can still access things from underneath. So if it doesn't fit, just take a toothpick and just kind of work the fit as you need to that way. I use this technique on the F4D that I did a few years back. Brad Pearson clued me into it, and yep, it is a super useful tip for these kind of spine inserts. Worked really, really well. So yeah, just like that. Ta-da! Alright, so as I'm trying to fit the cockpit into the fuselage of this lovely Zoukei-Mura F-4G, I'm running into one issue, and that is the starboard side here. The sill just, you can see on the port side, it's fine, right? The starboard side just does not want to go in. It's like taking all the force in the world just to hold it like this, in a way that I don't trust that it would hold just if I glued it and let go. There's something here that's just not at all happy, and I'm not entirely sure what it is. God damn it. Hold, you piece of shit. Yeah, that's definitely not what it is. And so, through my various investigations, I haven't been able to find anything. I've been, chipping off some little pieces, trying to see if there's like a misalignment of one of the, like an instrument panel or something like that. Like one of the shoulders is sticking out funny, and nothing's been working so far. And it's getting to that point where it's starting to piss me off. And you can see, like, I've trimmed away some of the ribs that you don't see. I trimmed away some of the lower ribs here that don't really matter, but that, might be interfering with the decal set, for example. And none of it works. And if I just go and plug it in, just, at this weird angle, everything is great. But then if I align it so that the gear bay fits into the thing it's supposed to fit into, and everything fits back here and fits into the various channels the way it's supposed to, we get that. And it does not want to close. Like, it is really pissy about it. And the interference, strangely, seems to be coming from, like, right here, where there's just not much to get in the way. Like, I'm not sure where the interference is coming from, unless it's like in this little zone right here. Because then when I lift it, that would make sense, because then I can clear that. So, I've trimmed away a little bit there to see if I can get that to work, but it's It's not doing it. So my next option, and I hate to go this way, but I think it might be necessary, is to come in here and see if I can trim out a little bit of this actual ledge, right? Like maybe this is the issue. And so because this shit won't be seen, so we don't necessarily need the whole line here to hold everything together. Alright, before I clean that up too much, let's just see if that even does anything at all whatsoever. Alright, that gets us closer. I think it gives me an idea too. This is the downside to all the hunky-dory Zoukei-Mura engineering is it's asking a whole lot of a whole bunch of pieces to come together in a way that just, you know, if something is slightly off, it can just fuck you. And so, but there's, you know, it's like, how do you test fit all this together at the same time? You don't. You have to commit to glue to some of it at least, or else it'll all fall to pieces. Okay. So my new theory is that it's actually the fucking bulkhead here that's doing it. So I can remove a bit more of it. What the fuck? What else is there that can get in the way here that can cause that? If it's like that, done like this. Alright, we're going to try one more thing. And then I'm just going to say fuck it, and we're just going to force it. The mystifying thing is that the shit keeps getting worse. Like, it starts out like, oh, that's okay, and then it's like, wait, never mind. Oh my god. Alright, we may have to just go with that. Okay, so after a somewhat protracted battle, I have finally got the cockpit in the damn F-4G. We've got it glued, we've got it taped, it is drying as we speak. I'm going to hope to God it holds. And that will mark the end of the cockpit journey with the F-4G Wild Weasel from Zoukei-Mura. There's still more work to do, obviously. There's the rear spine that needs to go on. I need to join the fuselage halves and keep moving from there. With the cockpit itself, I still need to come in here and do the cockpit sill, you know, properly, because it's got glue, which kind of trashed it. There's the combing to deal with and all that fun stuff. So this isn't our last time in the cockpit. This is just our last time gluing the fucker in. So sweet. That is one more notch on the Wild Weasel belt. Thank you all for watching. Keep an eye out for more, not only from the Zoukei-Mura kit, but from the main kit and the Weasel Off comparison videos as well. As always, if you want to check these out a little bit early before they go live to the world, there's always my Patreon page at patreon.com/dukesmodels. I'm hoping to have a bunch of other exclusive-y type things there soon, since I seem to be in a content churning out mode. And with that, I will leave you all until the next installment of whatever Wild Weasel shit happens to hit next. Thanks, and catch y'all later.